When you only do one project at a time, you're not as great than when you're doing 2 or 3 projects. And this doesn't have to be like paid projects. Like I always have this passion project on the side where you'll help shift the mindset, give you a break, and then you can come back to it. But when I've tried to do just one project and you hone in on just one thing, like your mind just needs a little bit of time to break. And that's really helpful.
It's the creativity cheat code.
So today I'm speaking to Alejandro Mejia, and he's also known as RMA Design. He used to be a pro water skier, but he's reinvented himself as a digital artist, a director, and he's known for working on films like Marvel's Loki. He worked on the Super Bowl titles, concert visuals, and even NFTs for kind of artists like Maluma. Pleased to have you here, Alejandro.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Pleased to be here.
Of course, I do want to talk a little bit about kind of the beginning of your career. Like I always enjoy how people got their start in the industry, and like you have a story that's probably not that usual because you were pro water skier in your youth. How old were you when you were doing that?
Yeah, I started water skiing when I was about 8 years old, and I really enjoyed it. I enjoy sports, any kind of sport, but it was nice to get hooked on a specific one where I learned how to hone in on passion and dedication. And it teaches you so many things when you're able to like pick one and stick with it for a long period of time. And that's what happened to me. It was something that I practiced until I was about 19. And it was a very great experience because I had the opportunity to travel around the world, to compete on different competitions, the Masters, the World Championships. And it was mostly something that helped me identify that I had specific drives, and that those drives, when you get hooked on them, it's almost like a drug. You become addicted to it, and you learn about progress, and this progress pushes you to the next level. And then once you reach that level, you want more, and it's an addictive process I that I learned early on, thankfully, and eventually I tried to do my best to transfer that into design and into what we do.
Yeah, like I've heard you speak about this before, and it's that same mentality that pushed you to compete at a high level is somehow you've took those lessons and put it into building a career in kind of the design industry.
And I think it goes hand in hand. And I still believe and I still treat my work in a very similar way. It's funny, and you heard when I was talking about it at Paradiso, when I became an athlete, I had a mentor. His name is Jared Llewellyn. He was like a legend in the sport. And very early on, I went to Canada, to the United States, to live with him and his family, with my brother and my cousin. And living with him, I learned a lot about what made him so good, what made him a world champion, and what got him to that level. And it was the little things, what he ate, like how he carried himself when he woke up, like structured schedule, like he had a process, right? And then if you learn from those people and you follow that process, then it got me to a whole nother level as an athlete, right? But before that, I did all of these things that were, I wouldn't say wrong, but not the right path to reach the goals that I had, right? And it took me probably like the same amount of time in our industry to, and I'm still trying to find it. I feel as a professional designer or what we do or in any field, you also try to find your path and your balance and your sort of like structure. But I find that it's harder to learn. It's not as straightforward in what we do than it is when you're competing as an athlete in a specific field. But yeah, it helps. It does transfer quite directly. And the more I mature, the more I see it, and the more I'm able to level up my game in what we do.
That's really interesting that you said that, like, hanging out with this kind of expert level, but it was the little things that you did that made the
Difference.
difference. Like,
Right.
how's that crossover into design? Because as an athlete, I think there's in a way, there's some crossover. Your body and your mind are still connected. If you're not looking after your body and your health, then you're not gonna be a great designer. Is that kind of some of the lessons that you've learned that have crossed over?
I think that is one of them. I feel like definitely like I haven't done great in keeping my body fit and like as sharp as I wanted to, because many times and at the beginning a few years back, and I still like I've grinded hard to try to learn the skills to do what we do because you become passionate about it and obsessed with it, and it becomes a thing where the activity is it forces us to be on a chair so many hours in a day that it's hard to keep up with what your body needs. But I feel like my goal and what I envision myself is that eventually get to a place where, yeah, you make the time to properly work out and keep up a healthy diet. And a diet is something that I've picked up in the last 2 years, and it's been great. Like it helped me like lose a ton of weight and maintain more energy when I work. It's incredible how much we forget about eating and like properly like taking care of ourselves when we're doing what we do, right? And the culture is totally there. I guess now it's simpler when you work remote, but back when we used to go to the studios, I remember every Friday at Imaginary Forces, we would have like donuts and all these like delicious treats that were hard to say no to. It's harder when you're at the studios.
Yeah. I want to talk about that a little bit because looking through your LinkedIn, like one of the first jobs you've got on there is Imaginary Forces. Is that where you started in the industry?
That's where I started in the industry, and I still work with them. Like right now, the project that I'm on is with Karen Pong. I think that Imaginary Forces really they taught me a lot. They were the very first project that I ever did. I was an intern at Imaginary Forces about 11 years ago, and that's where it all started. Before Imaginary Forces, I went to graphic design. I studied graphic design, and I started graphic design because I wanted to do something design related. However, I was more drawn to illustration, but I didn't really get into any great illustration program. And graphic design seemed to be something where you could make money, like where you could make a living. But during my career, I was always intrigued about learning 3D. Honestly, it I had no I'm not sure why I was so interested in 3D. Potentially because I felt like if I learned 3D, I could make really beautiful images and in a way not have to become an illustrator, but learn through 3D. And it luckily got me into IF. And once I went to IF, I was like, wow, like this is so cool. This is what I want to do. This is that was like the first time I was introduced to our industry. And it was a moment where I learned, wow, like there's so many people here that are it's almost like a like professional like when you see it like professional athletes, like they're like competing and they want to be the best and they're driven and they're motivated and it's almost like this little hub of people once you get really good. And it was like the same thing. It was like very similar. There's a niche of people that I have. It was like a great playground, got to meet a lot of people. I was introduced to Karen, to Tosh, and all these great directors that were working there, and slowly started to work my way up. Yeah. And these days I'm working with Karen right now and I'm still learning from her.
It's amazing. So how did this transition go? So you were a pro athlete and then you've got into kind of imaginary forces. So was it just like you got into a good college? Was it something that you always were doing in the background as well as being an athlete? Like,
Here's a funny story. When I was competing in water skiing, like my main strength was something that it's called trick skiing, which is basically very similar to wakeboarding. It's almost like gymnastics in the water. right? So like you have 20 seconds to execute like your run. So your tricks. And it's like your flips and your tantrums and your things, right? But there's a lot of pressure because if you fall, you're basically done. It's like in gymnastics where it has to be perfect for you to be able to win. So I was like this young kid that was like extremely flexible and like athletic, and I was like very talented. Like in practice, I was able to like learn things really fast, and I had a lot of talent for it. But I was very like, my mind wasn't as great in competitions. Like it just wouldn't operate the same way as it would when I was training. So my results when I trained were way better than in competition. So at that point, my dad, well, he was also an athlete. He was a professional roller skier, like very young. He's a lawyer in his face, but he was like, dude, like we gotta figure this out. Let's see how you can improve in competition. So he hooked me up with a sports psychologist, and I started to learn about the psychology behind the sport. And really, it's, I want to say 50 or 60 or 70% of it. If you're like, it's crazy. Like you would see people that they would be really bad in practice, but then in competition, they would kill it. And I was like, well, that's what I want to do. I want to learn how to do that. So in the process, my psychologist told me, why don't you do something that you enjoy separate from the sport that helps you get your mind outside of like all of these questions and overthinking and everything. And I was like, I've always loved drawing. And since I was a little kid, I would draw Dragon Ball Z characters and I would really like that. So I started drawing every day before going in the water, every competition before, drawing. And eventually these drawings turned into a board short brand. So I started like printing them in board shorts, my drawings, and selling the board shorts at the competitions. And it really helped me get my mind outside of like the competition itself. It was almost like it helps you disconnect, and it really helped me improve. So when I was about to go to college, I submitted all my drawings to a bunch of art schools and got into art school. And honestly, like when I started going to art school, I was still water skiing, but it's really tough to do two things at a high level. And I always wanted to like, whatever I do it as best I can. So I had to really make the choice. Am I going to continue down the athletic water skiing path or just focus on the design and the art and become great at that? I chose the art and the professional like design career because I can make a living from it.
Was it a tough decision?
It was a really tough decision. Like I feel like I would have wanted to continue being an athlete, but there was just like no way on sports that have no real funding and don't have any sort of like monetary support. My parents were like, dude, no way. Like, how are you gonna make a living?
Do you think that's different now because there's a lot more funding going into kind of like sports, and the Olympics is broadened out and all that kind of thing?
I think that there's certain sports that have like really high barriers of entry, and therefore they are very hard to become monetizable. And this sport, like water skiing, required so many specific things. First off, you gotta get a boat, right? And not everybody can afford a boat. Then you find like a lake that has like specific things. It had so many barriers of entry that I was like, I think that if anything, I don't think the sport has really grown monetarily since I stopped. I do it for fun now. Like I do a lot of wake surfing. Not like actually like what I used to do, but I live like I still have the passion for pursuing water skiing, but like I knew that as a professional athlete I couldn't really continue to do it. But if I became somebody in this world that we live in and what in design or in film or whatever we want to call it, I could get myself a boat, get myself in a position where I could like where I could do it for fun. And that's what I do. I built my house near a lake. I live beside a lake basically. and I go out and I surf and I ski like almost every day. And it's what I do to disconnect, and I do it for fun, right? But I always told my parents, like, you guys should have made me become a soccer player, or like as could continue to do it. And I always tell myself, like whenever I have kids, like I would love to give them the opportunity to pursue a sport that they could. They don't have to make that decision that I had to do. Like that the door, at least there is a door. Like in mine, there really wasn't, dude. Like you can't really yeah, try to make a living from that.
It's flipped now, so the art feeds the sport instead of like the
Yeah,
other way around. And you said something really interesting, like when you were working with the sports psychologist, and 70-80% of the game is mental. And I was researching like creativity as well. And some people believe that they aren't creative, but the only kind of barrier to creativity is like believing that you are creative. And there's that overlap as well, isn't there? The creative world is difficult and you have to work it out. But if you believe you can do it and you do the work, then you have a higher success or chance.
it's very mental, honestly. I think that there are layers to what we do. Specifically, like for example, when you go to work at IF or like Prologue or all of the studios, there's two different worlds that connect. There is the technical world and there is the creative world. The technical world, I believe, is a little bit easier, quote unquote, to get into. And that's basically how I began. Because if you know the tools, then you can get people that are directors like Karen and PJ and all and these leaders in the industry to want to hire you, and you can learn from them. And that's how I build myself to learning, like getting in the door. And then once you're in, you can start to do creative things. It's a little bit more complicated than trying to be the creative and going in and expecting other people to build the stuff for you.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to look at it, really. I've never thought about that because trying to be the best creative in the world, like what's even the path to that? What are the steps that you go through to being world class creative ideas? But like you say, if you get world class at technical skills, and that's a step in, that's a really insightful view, I think.
I think it's a step in, but it doesn't really necessarily guarantee that you can stay in there, because we can talk about that. But my point was that when you're in the technical world and when you're building stuff and where you're working with the whole team creating stuff, like there are definitely mental barriers that people get stuck in. And being able to understand how your mind thinks, not overthink it. This is fine. Keep going. Move on to the next task. That to me is huge. A lot of people that I work with these days, where I'm like the lead on many of the projects, like they'll ask me like how I can get through a lot of work and a lot of the chunk. And it's mainly because I try not to get stuck on mundane tasks. Like you give yourself a certain amount of time and you move on, and then you can come back. But it's almost like brush strokes that are broad and then fine tuned. And I think that really is not like outspoken a lot, but it's honestly the main difference between like middle and top notch artists, I believe. It's very helpful. But to the point of the technical stuff, I think that it's an entry, but it's definitely one of those things where you will never, you can't win, because there is always something new. There is always something new every day. There is AI. There is like AI coming, and you're not gonna win it. But I think that with the creative, there there is something about the creative that I find that is like that you can win, in terms of that AI will never have it, because like you have the ability to create ideas from nothing. And I think that's where I am trying to get to. Like that's the reason why I've been doing so many technical stuff, so that I can eventually be in a position where I can come up with the ideas with information, with something that backs it up.
Yeah. Before we get onto AI, because that is an interesting point, but we'll Maybe we'll circle back to that one. So you have worked at like Imaginary Forces and Prologue, like with Kyle Cooper. Like I was wondering if there's like any other kind of key things you learned there early in your career, or kind of pivotal moments that shaped your kind of the way you think, or the way you approach design.
I think that's a great question.
Put you on the spot.
I think that I learned things that there's different approaches to the industry. Obviously, the world of imaginary forces, where Kyle was there at the beginning, and then he split up and he did Prologue. And I feel like, to me, imaginary forces is a much more balanced place to work at, because they have structure, they have a little bit more of they. It's I see it more as like it's a bigger company because they take on projects to support the fun projects. They have a bigger team, so they'll take on other projects that I don't necessarily work on, but then they have the really fun projects that obviously don't make as much money, but they're really fun to work on, and you can have regular working days, and it's more something where like you go to work, you can get it done, and yes, the level and the quality is expected to be extremely high, but there is also a conscious for the well-being of people involved. Prologue is a little bit more as in, yes, that they conduct like really cool projects, but it's a never-ending grind. Like, it's you have to be like really good, but at the same time you're expected to work really long hours, and you're never done. And to me, that led me to burning out early on in my career, because I would always be chasing getting better, and like doing what I was doing at Prologue the best as I could, to like almost feel like I climbed that mountain on the project. But every time that I hit a milestone, there was a new one, and there was a new one, and there was a new one. And so if you go down that rabbit hole, it's never ending.
Yeah. Obviously, you're in like a position of leadership now. Are you still a freelancer, or do you have a team around you, like a studio set up, or?
No, I'm still a freelancer, but I would say that I'm in a gray zone right now, because I have done projects where I'm the creative lead, and like I have direct connection with the client, and I'll put together a team of artists and almost operate as a super small studio that scales up and scales down. I've done that with the world tour visuals for Maluma for about 4 or 5 years. I did that like every year, and I would bring on a team of people. We would execute it. My wife would work as the producer, and we would do that. I've also done other world tours, like for this guy called Ovi on the drums. He's the producer of Carol G. So like really high level like visuals for concerts. And I've also done like small teams where other studio like FX shops use FX, or these really large shops will subcontract me, and I'll put together a small team, and I'll lead those projects and deliver a bunch of shots for them. But at the same time, I'm still like freelancing. Like, I'm still working with IF as like an independent freelancer, and right now it's mainly just me and my wife. And if a project comes in that is larger with a direct client, we scale up a little bit. And if the client is a studio, then that's just me. So it's flexible.
Yeah.
I got to a point a few years ago where we were like a small studio, because we had continuous direct client relationships and had a few staff members going. But honestly, like I scaled down, because I feel like my passion is more in like creating like super high end work, and working with Karen, and working with these awesome directors, and like eventually become that director where like I'm in a position where to lead these bigger jobs. Although like concerts are really big jobs. Those are pretty big.
Yeah, I saw a photo of you on your Instagram, and like you were on set, I don't know, with a laptop setup or something. I imagine you were working on like the light and sound display, or things. Like, how did you learn to do that? That was quite different to being in a studio working on titles or films or videos.
That was actually super interesting. Like, when I some of my a good friend of mine from high school, he became a musician. So he writes songs for musicians, and he's been really successful. He's been nominated for Grammys, and or what do you call it? Like he's pretty big in the industry. So he started working with Maluma, and that's how I met Maluma. And he's done songs with him, and he introduced me to Maluma. And I actually met him because he wanted to learn how to surf. So I was like, okay, let's go water skiing. And like it's wake surf. So I taught him how to do it. And then he asked me, oh, so what do you do for a living? This and that. And I showed him my reel. This was like a long time ago. And he saw some of the work I did for the VMAs. This was at Elastic, like in 2016. He's, wow, dude, like I really like that. Can we do that for my show? And I was like, sure, let's do it. So I started doing like songs, like visuals for songs and for concerts. And I don't actually like program lights or any of that. I just built like cool visuals with something called SEMT, which is like the beat of the track. So you add it to the track, and then I would go to shows and test it out with the band, with everybody, and see it. So that's probably the pictures you saw from the stage. That was before Maluma went on tour like 2 years ago. We did their rehearsals in Vegas. It was a really fun experience. Yeah.
Have you always had this kind of mindset of doing lots of different things, sport, illustration, graphic design, movies, like concerts? Have you always been seeing creativity as like just one big open thing to tackle?
I think that I see it as in like I am like I make high end visuals in 3D and simulations, and like whatever we can apply that to, it's applicable. Like we can use it. It has so many applications. So whether it's for film, main title, commercial, concert, like anywhere where there is a screen, we can make something creatively awesome, right? And like the bigger the space, the bigger the impact. So concerts are a fantastic way to show off beautiful visuals. Concerts, I think that I got to a place on the last tour where the visuals were so shocking that they would compete with with the artist, and that's where well, that's the goal. Make them so cool that people look at them more than they more than the people that singing.
'Cause I bet that's not something that you pitch to your client.
Usually, what happens is that there's always the manager or somebody like for the artist, and if the visuals start to get too much attention, they'll start to swap screens with the camera. So, like the video of the guy singing to try to control, like to play with that perception. It's very
Yeah.
interesting. It's very cool. Yeah.
Of course, let's talk about burnout a little bit, because you alluded to that kind of being in a environment that was high pressure and always pushing yourself to the limit. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course. I think that I still, yeah, I've actually found like a decent balance, but I always have, it's important to identify first your personality. So I have an obsessive personality. That means that I want to be really good at something, and it's hard for me to unhook myself from thinking about it and doing it. And it's good in the sense of it helps you improve and it helps you get better at something, but it's also bad when you don't control that and basically just work a lot, because that leads to burnout. But I can say that now, years after I've already burned out, like I was talking about it in the conversation, like years after that, I've already gone through that. And that's why I go back to my athletic career early on. And having a mentor like Jared was basically what allowed me to become really good at being an athlete, because it showed me things that he had already learned throughout his career. He was years older than me, and I was able to do those things. So avoided injuries, avoided like over skiing, so getting burned out also as an athlete, because that happens a lot when people overtrain in sports. Is very clear, like you'll get hurt, or like you crash, or like you get super tired and you don't want to do it anymore. But it's very easy to identify in sports, I believe, because you're hurt. You can't go out and do it anymore. In our industry, it's harder because you will you can stretch yourself, I would say, a bit more in terms of your body's not gonna break down. Like you can still be at the computer, you can still be trying to do it. But when you step back and you're like, wow, like I made this amount of progress in 5 hours, as opposed to if I would rest it, I would do that in an hour. And that's you gotta step out of it and like really identify that to know it. So earlier on, I did those mistakes, and I think that really that's also because I've never really had a very specific mentor in what we do, and I think that's something that our industry doesn't really have because there's so many different pathways to what we do. Right. I have a mentor that will get on a call with me. His name is Ben Fox. He's a Houdini genius. He used to be like the TD frame store. So I get on calls with him and be like, I'm stuck. Ben, can you help me? So I pay him to get on a call with me for an hour and get ahead of the game. But that's about it. There's no mentorship in terms of have you eaten, have you gone to bed, like how much work are you doing, how many projects are you on? Like all those things don't really exist. So I've had to learn that on my own. And I've learned a lot from podcasts, like listening to the creator podcast from Ash Thorpe, where he talks a lot about like the projects that he was taking, things that he was doing, like whether or not he was tired or not. And back in the day, I would only do obviously like one project, and I would see Ash doing 5 or 6, and I was like, wow, like how? Like it's impossible. Testing things out. You test it, you crash and burn, you test another thing, you crash and burn until you find your sweet spot. Unfortunately, that's how I've learned to navigate the industry. But specifically about burnout, like I did burned out pretty bad when I was working at Prologue. And that means that I was working too many hours. I was having very little sleep, and I basically I became depressed. I became what I mean is that I lost the passion for it. Talked a lot on Paradiso about it. We lost the desire to do it. So you could go to work again, and you're like, wow, like it could be a super awesome project, but you don't feel happy that you're doing it, and that is my definition of burnout. Like when you lose the desire and you lose the that feeling you get when you have a project and you're like, oh man, like this is so cool. I'm gonna really enjoy it. I'm gonna and when that's not there, then you come back to the basic questions in life. So why is it that I'm doing it? What's the point? If I'm gonna do something that does not make me happy, doesn't make me fulfilled, then why? And that could be like a tough question. If the answer is, yeah, I don't want to do it, like I'm not happy about it, then what is my purpose? So that can really get you down.
Yeah, it's a burnout. The thing about burnout is you don't realize it at the time that you are burning out. You do, but you don't have the perspective. You can tell that something's not right. Like you weren't as productive as you used to be. You don't enjoy it as much as you used to. But yeah, like one of the things you said is it's about, I think it's about taking notice of warning signs. And one of the things you said is you noticed that like work's taking you longer. So is that something that you are more aware of now? If you realize that things that, would normally take a couple of hours are taking a day, half a day, is that a sign for you that maybe you need to take a break, do something else for a while?
Yeah, 100%. I think that's the sign. That's definitely one of those things where you're like, wow, let's take a break. Let's do something else. Either it can be, it doesn't necessarily need to be going out, working out, go for a walk, go for a swim, go. For me, it's like when I get to go surf, like that resets me, or like work on a different project. Working on different projects, it's a tricky subject. I do think that like when you're committed to a studio and working with a studio, like you do need to be respectful that you're giving them the hours that they're paying for. And I always do that. But I am also, to be absolutely transparent, like when you only do one project at a time, you're not as great than when you're doing two or three projects. And this doesn't have to be like paid projects. Like I always have this passion project on the side where you'll help shift the mindset, give you a break, and then you can come back to it. But when I've tried to do just one project and you hone in on just one thing, like your mind just needs a little bit of time to break. And I think that's really helpful.
That's super interesting. It's like you would think that one thing's better to focus on one thing and less stress, but you find it better to have multiple things that you can go back and forth to. So it feels like you've taken a break almost.
I do believe that. And I think that's one of the same things that we were talking about earlier. I think that's why it's hard to have an actual like live mentor in our industry because it works different for everybody. And I have this friend, his name is Danny Garcia, and he's worked a lot with me. And I've done projects where I bring him on and we work together and we tested it, both of us. And it doesn't work like that for him. Like he has to do just one project, focus on just one thing, and that's how his mind works. And I also would test out just one project, just focus on it. And I can spend 10 hours on that project, just focusing on that. But if I do two projects like that and then my own thing or whatever else or this other thing or mix it up with something different creatively, wow, like I can get it done instead of 10 hours, 3 hours. It's ridiculous. It's crazy. I don't know why, but it's just, I think that's one of the things about maturing in our industry and like testing things out and seeing like how your mind works and what's best for it. Yeah. Especially with creative stuff. Like that's how you get mind blocks, don't you think? Like when you're creative block and when you have a creative block and you try to go and you try to keep doing it and do it, you can spend hours spinning your wheels as opposed to, and then you like learn to come back the next day fresh and you solve it in 10 minutes. It's really weird.
It is true. It's because it's like your subconscious needs the time and the space to solve it, and like you can find yourself in a place where the deadline's looming and you're stressed, and the stress physically reduces your level of creativity. Like it's proven, like if you're stressed, you're like less creative. And like the subconscious has a lot to do with kind of what we do, like things that you reference in your life experiences, connecting dots. Creativity is essentially connecting dots, and
Yeah.
you need space to do that. I find it interesting that you tested this. Like you literally, like where did that idea come from? What made you do that?
I tested it because I've worked with many artists and I am nowadays more in a position where like I'm leading projects or like I have other artists that are working with me and you have to know their capabilities and the way they work and the speed and all of these things. So I've been curious if it works the same for everybody. So I decided to test it to see how different people react. And you can do that when you have your own projects. Like you can't really do that with studios. Like you would have to do it with direct client studio projects where, oh well, test this out and then in the afternoon test this other thing out and then you see how people react. And the majority of people like get so caught up that like they get overwhelmed and not make much progress. And so I learned to understand it's almost like if you go to bed, like you write the things down that you have to do, that you're like, a lot of times I'm like, before I go to bed, I'm like, so what would my day look like tomorrow? How would my day be successful tomorrow? So I'll be like, oh, okay, I gotta get this done, this done, this done. And if by the end of the day I've hit those things, then I had a productive day. And if you go in the day like that and you hit those things, you will find that more often than not, you finish faster, as opposed to just going in there with just one task, one thing to do all day. You will test that thing in multiple different ways, and more often than not, finish doing it in the first way that you were trying to do it. And it's just less productive.
Are you the kind of person that's into like systems and processes? Are you always looking for like a small cheat code to improve performance? Is this going back to the athletic mentality?
I'm not a very structured, but I'm not like, I don't think that there's a cheat really. And I don't see myself like competing with other people or trying to find like this shortcut. To me, it's more about like, how can I be the best version of myself? So
Mm.
how can I be more productive when I'm at the office? Because if I am more productive, then my clients are happier and my wife is happier because I get to spend more time with her. My body is happier because I get time to go and work out. Right. So a lot of the things that I'm trying to learn and optimize is like, how can I live a more fulfilling life, because my projects are something that I find passion in, and that's my why. I do them because passionate about them and I'm having fun. How can I do that effectively so that I can get it over to my clients in time, not like spending 2 days on something that can be done half a day. And then like, how do I utilize that time that I have left? So with my loved ones, taking care of my body, taking care of this and that, or just playing video games or whatever you want to do, right? But I feel like you can only achieve that if you become better at managing yourself.
Yeah. I hope this is true because I used AI to research it. You said that one of the values is to do meaningful creative work. Is that true?
100%. 100%.
So how do you define meaningful creative work?
I All right. So this is the core thing of why we do what we do. Really, for me, everybody has a different definition. But at the beginning, when I first started out, I just wanted to make pretty images, right? Like making beautiful images. And the problem with that is that nobody cares. That's the harsh truth. If you just make beautiful things, then AI can do it. Then like anybody can do it. And I say AI because I'm just referring to a beautiful thing. We're cluttered with imagery. We've seen so many beautiful things. Like people don't necessarily these days like get hooked or attracted to those, to like just a beautiful image. So the reason why it's important to have a why behind why we do what we do, and what I believe is a successful thing, is when you answer the question that you're trying to answer. So if it's a client, for example, like really understanding that, what is it that they're trying to communicate? Is it that they want this, they want to show that a product does this and that and these things. So how do we show that in a beautiful way? How do we show that creatively? How can we show that in a way in which people pay attention? And when you're able to do that, then you have fulfilled the ask. And a lot of the times recently, I think about things in terms of building out the story first. And I'm almost like, okay, does this hit the points that the client wants? If we're talking about a pair of glasses, for example, or whatever, like the client wants to show that they improve your vision. Do I show that or do I not show that? And if I'm able to show that and not communicate it verbally to somebody close by, and they're like, oh, wow, so that makes you see better, then I know that I was able to communicate something visually first. And then you can make it as beautiful as you want. And if you make it super beautiful, then that's just going to like truthfully attract people in our industry. But it doesn't necessarily mean that making it more beautiful is going to make the client happier or not. Some clients just don't care. They just want to make sure that like the reason what they're getting something out of what they're paying, and they're paying to communicate something. So for me, that is cool. Like, I enjoy that. I enjoy being able to have that ability. And there is art to that, right? There is an art to doing that. And sometimes it could be something, like I said, like a pair of glasses that might sound mundane, but there are other things that I want to communicate. Like, I'm getting more into just the sake of doing art, right? So lately I've been reading a lot of the biography and the information and things about Michelangelo and Da Vinci and the reason behind why they were doing certain portraits and certain paintings. And I just find it fascinating that they would actually create those pieces with so many meanings behind it. Everything had a reason, everything had a message. Just communicating through messages visually is something that I enjoy, if that answers the question.
Yeah, yeah. That's interesting that you're researching kind of Michelangelo and all these older artists.
It goes way back. I was actually on vacation with my wife like about a month ago. We went to Italy and we were checking out like in Florence, like Michelangelo's sculptures, and I got this like history book about it, and I started looking, and like everything had such a specific reason. It wasn't just do it just because he's doing like this huge David. Like you would look at it from one side and it means something. You look at it from the other side and it means this other thing. So like it's powerful to communicate through art and to express a message through art. And I guess we these days like we use it to sell things. And I'm not as passionate about creating like product like commercials and stuff for things that I don't really believe in. To be honest, we've all done it because we gotta pay the bills, right? But in the end, I don't think that's really what really motivates me.
That's cool. Yeah. So you like to in is this something you're gonna be trying to bring in more into your work, like hidden meanings or double meanings or
I think that in my personal work, yes. I think that in my personal work, like my beliefs and the things that I think in my personal work, it's for me, right? So my beliefs matter. In my clients and some clients, like it's really about them and their beliefs and their messages. And if you can have those things that they believe in incorporated in the artwork that you're creating for them, that's gonna make them happy, right? That's gonna just elevate more. But I think that it's
yeah.
important to understand that there is a difference between my own personal projects and my clients' projects. And you gotta be selfless in terms of like when I'm working for a tech brand and for a product or something that is somebody else's film or something, it's not mine, it's for them. And I'm gonna execute it to the best of my ability to try to communicate what they want to communicate.
Cool. It's been great chatting to you. I want to be like respectful of your time because we've already hit an hour. There was so much more we could have spoke about. I had planned, but I don't want to keep you here forever. So I think you've shared some great insights. I think there's a lot of like little tips and points in there that people can learn from. So I really appreciate you.
Yeah, 100%. And we can always do it again. We never got to talk about AI.